party to pass their agenda.
This is dishonest.
If you have the party if your party is in charge in Congress, they look to the president to set the agenda for the party. After all, in the elections, people who turn out to vote are typically voting.
So Biden never weaponized his DOJ, and that's what you're saying. Biden never asked.
No, he absolutely did.
When did he have?
Dr. Cornel West and progressive commentator from the MeidasTouch, Adam Mockler, went on Abby Phillip's CNN show to go up against MAGA Stooge Scott Jennings. We're going to take a look at these clips from Abby Phillip's show. We're going to see this heated debate between Adam Mockler, Dr. Cornel West, and Scott Jennings. I have my thoughts to share on this as well. This is a good one. Let's get into it together.
Tonight, Donald Trump is reportedly shocked at how little resistance he's getting in his second term. The Wall Street Journal reports that the president feels emboldened, while top advisors joke that he's ruling lawmakers with an iron fist. In fact, longtime ally Steve Bannon is likening Congress to the Russian assembly, whose purpose under Vladimir Putin is largely ceremonial. Now, Barack Obama agrees. The former president is scolding businesses and universities for not standing up to Trump and for criticizing his values.
We have blown through, just in the last 6 months, a whole range of not simply assumptions, but rules and laws and practices that were put in place to ensure that nobody's above the law, and that we don't use the federal government to simply reward our friends and punish our enemies.
Now, I want to start with the Trump part of this, which is what Bannon notes in this piece, which is essentially that he's treating Congress just as like, a ceremonial thing that's there to just like sign off on his policies. And that is kind of how Congress is behaving in this moment. So I'm not surprised, I guess, I don't know if you are, that Trump feels like he can kind of do whatever he wants in this moment.
So I agree that Congress needs to rediscover its agency and actually start acting like Congress, start legislating, end the shutdown, all of that jazz. But I think it would be really silly to accuse Trump of being, again, this like unilateral executive when under the Biden administration, the Obama administrations, they maximized their mandate fully. We remember Obamacare was the hallmark achievement of Obama's term. We forget how extremely controversial, divisive that was at the time.
That was passed with a supermajority in Congress.
But the point is that he pushed it through.
I mean, that was
Trump
a
is ruling through
legislative accomplishment that was passed with. They needed 60 votes to get that done, and they got it done with 60 votes.
Biden instituted.
I don't think there's anything that they've gotten 60 votes.
Trump is ruling via executive order.
If you want to talk about rule by executive order, Biden issued a ton of executive
Donald Trump on his
orders.
first day issued a historic amount, and since then he has been subverting Congress. He appointed Elon Musk in this special position, and it seems like they were subverting the power of the purse the entire time. At the end of the day, Congress has been Donald Trump has been stomping on them, not even paying attention to them. He has absolutely been consolidating power by appointing loyalists into key positions across agencies. And then those agencies,
let's talk about who's setting precedent
the president
here.
of the United States appointed people who support his agenda to place in the federal government?
Are you telling me that you're okay with
goodness.
Donald Trump asking Pam Bondi directly? It was supposed to be a DM, and he accidentally posted it. Don't just come on that. This is unprecedented.
All presidents appoint their supporters and the people who support their agenda.
Do they ask their supporters to indict 3 people, and then two of those 3 people are then indicted?
They're members of Congress from their party to pass their agenda.
This is dishonest.
If you have the party if your party is in charge in Congress, they look to the president to set the agenda for the party. After all, in the elections, people who turn out to vote are typically voting.
So Biden never weaponized his DOJ, and that's what you're saying. Biden never asked.
No, he absolutely did.
When did he ask Merrick Garland?
You want to talk about lawfare?
When did he ask Merrick Garland to go after someone? Trump sent a DM to Pam Bondi. This is unprecedented.
The Merrick Garland who sent the parental rights memo that basically demonized
and Biden asked him to do that when did
school
Biden?
Board meetings.
I'm going to ask you a simple question. When did Biden ask him to do that?
Garland collaborated with Biden to send that memo weaponizing the FBI and law enforcement.
Garland collaborated with Biden.
With the Biden administration, yes.
Okay.
That was their policy.
Garland collaborated
it was
with
the
Biden.
administration's policy.
And I think that Adam's question, and it's a question I guess apparently this comes up on the show every other day, is where is the evidence that was directed by the White House? Where's the evidence that it was directed? And I'm going to broaden it, like not just the president, because you could argue that if you're going to compare apples to apples, the direction needs to come from the president, but from the White House. Where's the evidence of that?
Where's the evidence they disagreed with it? Is this not his administration's
disagreeing
policy?
with it is not a crime.
That's a totally different.
Is it not his?
That's
Is
a
it
totally
not his
different
policy?
thing.
Was it not his administration's policy?
Where is the evidence that?
Where is the evidence that he wasn't happy with his own
But hold on a
administration's
second,
policy?
Scott. I actually think that's a really important point, because whether it is agreement or disagreement, both of those things would be involving themselves in what's going on at DOJ in a way that most presidents don't, and that Donald Trump is. So whether or not they said do this or don't do that, both of those things would actually be off limits in a world in which DOJ is allowed to.
I love when Adam Mockler is on Abby Phillip's show to go up against this smug prick, Scott Jennings. He's one of the very few that will go on there and just say it like it is. I'm talking about Adam Mockler and just say, that's dishonest. What you're saying is dishonest. Could you imagine if Joe Biden had done 10% of what Donald Trump is doing and has done so far in just not even his first year of his second term? Imagine. And what's always hilarious to me is the MAGA pundits, Scott Jennings and the rest, they can always hold two thoughts in their mind that are completely opposite of the other and spout those out. And what I mean by this is Joe Biden, what do we always hear from them about Joe Biden? He was this doddering old fool. He didn't know where he was. He was drooling on himself. Unlike Donald Trump, who's this virile, tough guy who's at the top of his game. So Joe Biden was this doddering old fool, which also at the same time was this evil taskmaster dictator ruling with an iron fist, right? You know, I don't think both things can be true. But reality and truth don't exist in the world of Scott Jennings and the rest of MAGA when they go on shows like Abby Phillip's to spread misinformation and disinformation. In terms of the ACA, you know, they act like this was this horrible authoritarian plan and ruling. And like Abby Phillip said, it took 60 votes to get it passed. The MAGA pundits are talking about how it was controversial. Was this controversial because far-right wingers like them made it controversial? But the ACA is overwhelmingly popular now. So we all know what Scott Jennings is saying here is absolute nonsense. MAGA is all about projection. They know that Donald Trump is an authoritarian, and they love that. And Scott Jennings and the rest, every night on Abby Phillip's show, pretend like Joe Biden and Barack Obama were and are authoritarians just like Donald Trump. Could you imagine Joe Biden or Barack Obama had sent federal troops into cities? Can you imagine the uproar that we would have seen over that? They viewed it as authoritarian. I mean, I wasn't aware of Scott Jennings back then, but so I don't know what he was doing, if he was on TV or not. But they viewed it as authoritarian that Michelle Obama tried to get kids to eat vegetables in school. You know, it was authoritarian when Barack Obama wore a tan suit. So spare me the BS, Scott Jennings.
That's what
in a world in which DOJ is allowed to pursue the rule of law.
If Joe Biden was mad about Merrick Garland going after ordinary parents, he could have put a stop to it. But I think he loved it.
Do you think that the president should be engaged one way or another, saying affirmatively or saying negatively, about what the DOJ is doing?
I have told you many times. I think it's fine for the president to express opinions about how his administration operates.
He directly asked her. I love watching the conservatives duck and dodge.
I think that this is super important because Adam's making an important point. Trump said, you're not doing your job. In fact, he said something very similar just the other day. I mean, you're not doing your job. He called out 3 names. 2 of those people have been indicted. So that's more than just expressing an opinion. That was an order.
It is extraordinarily naive to believe that the Biden Department of Justice operated as some disembodied, floating, magical seahorse out in the ether. That is not the way it works.
What his department's doing. Those are his departments.
All right, go ahead.
It's executive
For me, the problem is, especially Brother Scott, though, man, if one side is doing something immoral, all you're going to do is point out what the other side did that was immoral.
What is immoral?
There is no equivocation here.
Tell me what's immoral.
The violation of constitutional separation of sites in spheres.
Who set that precedent?
If
Who
one
set that
party is
precedent?
weaponizing, you say the other party is weaponizing.
I love watching the conservatives
so that we
on this
never
panel.
get beyond any kind of immorality. We just rationalize more immorality, concentration of power, and you end up.
I think that's fundamentally
for the fascism. That's how you end up with
there are quibbles
fascism.
about whether
no morality
or not
whatsoever.
you guys have proof of your allegations of weaponization, which I've heard none so far at this table.
2013,
but even
if you did have weaponization of both, so what? They're both wrong. They're both wrong.
Right, exactly. So even if you do, wouldn't the correct response be to restore actual rule of law in those institutions as opposed to further weaponizing
Absolutely.
them?
Are you sure that the people who've been indicted aren't guilty?
That's not the point. That is not the point.
I didn't make any statements about their guilt or innocence.
But you seem to think it's a violation of the rule of law for a grand jury to have indicted them.
No, Scott, that's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about Donald Trump's role in directing his attorney general about who to prosecute. That's what we're talking about.
Who then has to go to a grand jury and present evidence and go through the process like everybody else in this country.
But the first prosecutor, Eric Siebert, didn't want to do it, so Trump forced him out. I love watching the conservatives. Listen, I love watching the conservatives on this panel dodge and weave with zero evidence whatsoever of any weaponization. I've asked you this multiple times, and you have no evidence, yet Donald Trump tried to send Pam Bondi a DM. This should be embarrassing that you are defending the President of the United States as he is directly asking.
I'm defending a process of grand juries that's existed in this country for a very long time.
I want to just raise
So Scott Jennings, who, he's strongly believes in the rule of law and, let's have a grand jury and let's see what the courts say and everything. His God King, Donald Trump, convicted of, 34 felonies? Oh, but Scott Jennings is going to, that was a witch hunt. That was trumped up by radical liberals. Now he suddenly cares about the rule of law and what courts have to say. Again, Scott Jennings is all about spin. It's great what Cornel West said there about essentially calling out whataboutism on the part of Scott Jennings. Scott Jennings is all about whataboutism. It's always, night after night on Abby Phillip show. Scott Jennings bring up anything about Donald Trump. Well, what about Biden? Well, what about Obama? And as Abby Phillip has pointed out here, Scott Jennings and the MAGA lady, Caroline Downey, I believe her name is, they're not making real comparable points of anything that the Biden administration did that is anywhere close to the level of the law-breaking and violations of the Constitution that we're seeing from the Trump administration. And Scott Jennings knows that, but Scott Jennings doesn't care. Cornel West is spot on when he points out the lack of morality. All of these MAGA pundits, like Scott Jennings, I don't know if they realize that what they're peddling is wrong and immoral. I don't think Scott Jennings is stupid, so I suspect that he does know that what he's peddling is immoral, but he doesn't care because he's on CNN every night and he's making a lot of money, I'm sure. But Cornel West is absolutely correct to point out this is basically the underlying tenet of MAGA and the Republicans right now. Everything is what about? What about Biden? What about Obama? And there's absolutely no doubt that Scott Jennings and the rest of MAGA would have lost their minds if a Democratic president did even a tiny portion of the illegal and unconstitutional things that Donald Trump is doing and just steamrolled over Congress. What Abby Phillip and the rest pointed out at the top of this segment is that it is true that Donald Trump is steamrolling Congress and Congress is doing almost nothing to fight back. But let me know what you think about all this. Do you agree with what Adam Mockler had to say on here? As I said it before, I love when he's on here because he really digs in on this prick, Scott Jennings. Do you agree with what Cornel West had to say? Do you agree with Abby Phillip's points? Or do you agree with Scott Jennings and Caroline Downey, the other MAGA person? Let me know in the comments what you think. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. I'm Chris on Culture, and I will see you in the next video.